Okay, so second week done on my RSA brief. I have figured out which brief I'm doing. A bit straighter. I figured out which brief I'm doing, and it's going to be the part 5 branching out brief. Main reasons I chose this brief were because one, it was sponsored by John Makepeace, a furniture designer, and it's something I want to, his brand I want to look more into, and I want to create a furniture piece predominantly. So that's why I chose that mostly. I don't really have too much of a passion in the forest or saving the forest, but it's something I will look into, and the small research I've done so far, it's been very interesting, but also very challenging. Okay, so I formulated the brief. This took a couple days because I sort of tossed and turned whether how specific I needed to be while choosing the brief. I don't want to be too broad and have a too big a brief, which was a struggle for most of it, actually. I wasn't too specific. The brief I chose, after a bit of deliberation, went through a couple processes. It was, the goal of it is to raise awareness for forests, educate the UK population on replanting trees, woodland forests, and everything that goes with them. Context, woodland forests, thinnings, and John Makepeace. Thinnings is the process, it's done in a process of timber production, which is basically, it cuts out all the dead trees and all the trees that are using up nutrients, so the big trees, the main trees can grow even stronger and quicker. The constraints, I wanted the piece, my furniture piece, to be made out of, or made using thinnings. It's not entirely going to be made out of thinnings, I don't believe, but I just wanted to put that in there so to relate back to the forest. And I want it to be free to the public to use, because obviously I need to educate, so the public need to be fully engaged with it. Also, I haven't specified in my brief that it has to be furniture, but I know it will be. The criteria, I want to connect the UK population to the woodland forests. It's easy to learn for people, so even if they just interact with it for 30 seconds, they know more once they've used the product than they did before they used the product, and also accessible for everyone. So I've got quite a few ideas of how I'm going to approach my own brief, but first I want to check what is thinnings, because it's a major part of the project. It said in the initial brief about thinnings, and I really want to use it and see if it is possible to make a whole piece of furniture out of it. But that is proving very difficult, but I'll get to that. Thinnings, like I said, it's the manufacture process in timber production. It happens about 3 or 4 years before the final trees are cut down, but it basically thins all the ivy and all of the shrubs on the ground floor that are taking up nutrients that the main PCTs can use, potential crop tree can use, and it's vital to the process. There's no way around not doing it. So, but at the moment, this is the bit that's a bit confusing, because in the John Makepeace branching out brief, it said the thinnings normally go to different sort of places, so either wood for wood burners, or fuel, or something else. But that's a vital process that needs to be done, and it was sort of saying in the brief that it didn't need to be done, or this wood shouldn't be going to burning to be burnt, but like wood always needs to be burnt for log burners and that. So it's going to be quite tough to implement it, because I've been speaking to all the local suppliers. I spoke to Jason's Timber I think they're based in, where were they based to? I can't remember where they're based, but it was around Birmingham somewhere. I think it could be Yardley. And they got back to me and said, fortunately we can't help, all our timber is made using the PCTs. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And then went to another place. I went to the Great Bar Sawmill, and this guy was actually very helpful. I sent them an email and they were a bit confused about what I meant, and they were talking about sawdust. I was like, I don't want sawdust, and I think they thought I meant thinning the wood as in planing the wood. But they said, okay. I was like, oh, okay. But then he said, give me a ring. So I was like, oh, I'll give him a ring. And he was very helpful. He told me what the forests they use do with their thinnings, and they said most of the time the thinnings just get left on the ground because there's no point even shipping them out for the cost and the logistics. They leave it on the ground, and then the nutrients from the thinnings go back into the ground and therefore make the trees grow. So there's zero waste there. So just put onto the ground, and then so that was very useful. But then not useful because I still want to use thinnings. But then he said, you probably won't get any joy from any suppliers around here because they buy in the planks. So I was like, oh, okay, that's fair enough. That's a good point. But he said, speak to the Forestry Commission, and I was like, okay. So I also spoke to my dad at this point because he uses lots of timber when he builds his houses. And I said, where do you get your timber from? He said, well, you get it from Travis Perkins and Sydenham's and all the major sort of suppliers. And so I thought that wasn't very helpful. But he said he owns a little forest at the bottom of our garden, and he said the thinnings that the forest down ours produces is nothing. So he was a bit shocked that I even wanted to use thinnings for a product. But he said check out the Woodland Trust, and so they are sponsoring the brief as well. So I did that. First I spoke to the the Woodland Trust, and they were useless. They said, well, we'll forward you on to someone else. Then they didn't know what they were talking about, so they were pointless. But then I spoke to the Forestry Commission, and they didn't know really too much about it either. But they gave me some good contacts. They gave me the number for the Sherwood Forest, Nottingham forester. So I rang her up, and she was helpful as well. She sort of said, you'll have a job to get thinnings from suppliers or sawmills. So I've got that now. I know that. But she said, feel free to come over. She said any forest will have thinnings on the ground, and just pick them up. And so I was like, okay, I think that's what I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to go over to a woodland forest dedicated to timber production, and then collect some from the ground, which in a way it's better because I know I can pick the pieces I want, but obviously I won't be able to make, well, I may be able to make the whole chair out of things, but I'm going to have to visit a place and really see. Talking about visiting the place, the Forestry Commission, they also put me in the direction of, what was it? It was, I think it was hang on 2 seconds, I just need to find the name. They gave me a name of this company who basically deal with buying and selling of forests. So it sounded quite promising. So I checked out their website. I'll find the name of it. Emails. Wrong email. It's the Till Hill Forestry Limited. And so I emailed them. I said, do you have any ideas? Even if it's putting me in contact with someone who owns a forest, well, not owns a forest, but runs a forest, and is thinning at the moment. They came back to me the same day, and they gave me a contact, or they forwarded my email onto a Mr. David Brown, who is the senior forest manager at Sledgemore, North Yorkshire. Now, he hasn't replied to me yet, but that was only on Friday they forwarded the email, and Sunday today. So hopefully by Monday or Tuesday next week, he'll be in contact with me. Whether or not anything will come from that, but it would be interesting to visit the forest. I know North Yorkshire is going to be a bit of a trek, but it would be interesting to go down and have sort of contact with a forester like David. So I'm excited for that. But I don't want to start designing until I really know the materials I work with, because what I can see happening is I create this piece, and I design it. I'm like, yes, bored with this, and then I find out it's not plausible. So I'm gonna give it till Wednesday, Thursday next week, and then if I don't find anything by now, I'm just gonna have to find a forest Nobel. But the plan for next week on this module is, speak to him, do a bit more research on thinnings, and find any photos I can of the sort of quality of wood, and then hopefully by the end of the week I'll be starting designing. In the meantime, I will probably come up with some sort of things that relate to the brief, not design them, but just like a piece of furniture, ideas that could relate back to the brief, and so I'm ready to design. So that's next week's project. Thank you very much.